From an initial aura of pessimism, Nigeria's third force political parties appear to have emerged with a stronger appeal ahead of the 2023 elections. This is majorly because many Nigerians have become more aware of the nation's reality, which is evident in a growing number of young Nigerians registering for their permanent voters' cards, known as the PVCs. A lot of them showed uncanny resilience to get their permanent voters' cards during the just concluded National Voter Registration exercise in a clear statement of intent ahead of next year's general election. Well, joining us now to assess the chances of this third force party is a researcher, strategist and broadcaster, Adeniyi Kunnu. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, following the realization that Nigeria, should we say, is not really any better under the APC, it became imperative to have another third force. But so far, none of the smaller parties that we expected will merge or that showed interest in merging have been able to do so. What would you say is responsible for that?
I think that's an assumption. Let's say this very clearly, that the processes for registering other parties, which of course would be like the PDP and the APCs of those world, is the same process that was followed through that a party that I am with, for instance, at the ADC, actually used ditto many other parties. And I think that it is because, you know, that's what they call the Big Bang Theory, where it appears as if there's a lot of noise everywhere. And when momentum is actually appropriate at a juncture, we don't find it. So I do not think that those that say the third force are not there. Do not forget that when we talk about the campaign period proper, it begins September the 28th of the coming month, and people are, of course, tidying up things. For instance, the APC is in government. The PDP has a number of candidates across the nation, and being those who occupy certain positions, they will definitely be speaking. So for us as a party, for instance, and many others whose history is available if somebody digs deep, in 2007, the ADC came seventh. It came fourth, as a matter of fact. When you come to 2011, it came seventh. In 2015, it came eighth. And of course, in 2019, the ADC happens to be the fourth party, you know, ahead of APGA that even holds the state. So some parties, as myself and many others, are holding their own. But importantly is the fact that when the period officially comes forth and things will be done, and many of those parties, including myself that I speak for, quite frankly, are doing a lot across the federation. So it is key to say that they are there and very well. Do not also forget that we had well over 100 and something parties. Over 100 parties were delisted. So for my party and perhaps many others who are not, you know, everywhere in the news, they most definitely can hold their own. And don't forget this, the PDP and the APC appears to have exhausted all ideas, haven't been privileged to occupy the position that they occupy over the years. And it is common knowledge, maybe not for those of you who are the occupants of the fourth estate of the realm, that they've exhausted every idea with respect to economy, with respect to security. And what we stand for is that we have the capacity to take Nigeria to the next level, that people will definitely feel positivity of a nation and in leadership. So we are there, most definitely.
Well, we as a fourth estate of the realm are aware of the exhaustion of those you know, options. But an interesting article by Tayo actually says that the third force is the biggest issue is the fact that you're divided. Instead of forming one single, may I finish? Instead of forming one single coalition, you have the likes of, you know, Peter Obi, the Kingsley Moghalu and Obi Ezekwesili that have become basically lone rangers, and that in having these numerous parties, even though the agenda should have been, you know, third force, now we have like third, fourth, fifth, that's exactly what's going to hand over power back to the PDP or the APC.
No, for those of us in the ADC, I must say very clearly that when it comes to more or less joining forces with others, while some other persons feel, well, it is what they want to do, we believe we have the capacity. A party that came forth in 2019 election is not a party that
Can I briefly interrupt you? You keep saying you came fourth, but can we talk about the margin between
the reality is that should form part of the conversation. That party has been there since 2005. You can't take that away. Some parties are not as consistent as mine, and they just want to be part of the such thought force. We know that there's a thought force somewhere, but as a party that has been able to hold its own going to 20 years, I think such recognition cannot be taken away so easily. But I need to say this very clearly, that whatever party holds its own now, it is because people have lent credence to that party over time. There is no party that emerged as being either the first or the second. People actually support parties to become big or small. It therefore means that for us, the fact that we've been there over time, the fact that we believe that there's a diagnosis that have been done to examine the problems of the country, and that our symbol really symbolizes that we hold hands together, means all the cracks on the Nigerian terrain can be put together. But notably here is that when people, for instance, if you gauge the reaction of people across this country, I am very well traveled across this country, and I can tell you that if you go to as far as Kafanchan, the things you see at times in the media isn't a true reflection of people's acceptance of the so-called majority parties. It therefore means that the defining moment will come in 2023 where many of these parties will be shocked to their marrows. And I need you to remember this day that I came on your program and said it, that the 2023 election is going to be a shocker. Those that are making all the noise now will definitely thought maybe we shouldn't have made so much noise and maybe gone all the way, because it's going to be a moment in Nigeria's political history where my party obviously is going to be the leading party amongst many others, even if it doesn't appear so. Let me say this. For people that have studied history of elections, and if you look at the historicity of Nigeria's contemporary elections, you find out that every 10 years or 12, every 16 years, and every 30 years, look at the first, second, third, and now the Fourth Republic, there's always a major shift. And this year also is leading us into another year where something very significant will be done. So please note that we've had this conversation today, and I should be quoted.
Well, definitely we'll note that, but there are some people that will say that if any third force,
yes,
is likely to succeed, it will be the obedience movement, not the ADC.
Okay, let's say this. Just first of all, check the Labour Party. The Labour Party wasn't among the first 6, 7, 8 parties in 2019. And if you look at how the Labour Party perhaps has been doing its own thing, obviously they're looking at the treatment of the man that is the candidate of that party. Don't forget that those emotions that resulted in his departure from the PDP appears to be speaking. We appear to be the underdog this time, but you never can tell the strategy in place. We are an organic party. We have well over 3,000 participants in these elections across the country. We've had people who were, of course, a senatorial seat, about 5 House of Reps members. They were with us. We actually sired them to fruition. It means that for us, we may not make the noise others make, but we know the grassroots. We know how to deal with it. And these conversations have continued. For instance, a couple of days ago, we held a world press conference, and your media house was also there to actually put that story outside. And sooner than later, I would also be going to Arewa House, the political capital of the North, that is in Kaduna, to tell people that have been with us over the year. And of course, the unveiling of our campaign director general, the person of Abdulaziz Sani, who is the leader of the coalition of northern groups. These are people that over the years have been able to hold their own. And we have evolved strategies to bring the people that have actually been making things happen on our own platform. So when they talk about the obedient movement, of course, everybody who is part of that group has the right. You can't circumscribe people's right to belong where they want to belong. And of course, the person leading them has done well for himself to be able to have amassed such movements. But do not forget also that there is a story of the underdog. There's a theory of the underdog. And oftentimes when the underdog appears to emerge, I tell you, it's going to be colossal. So we are not miffed by whatever we see. We know our onions, we know our alliances, we know our strategies, and we of course have that diagnosis of the Nigerian problem. Majority of what has bedeviled us to have allowed many people react the way we see is because perhaps the people that appear to be in power do not even have an idea of what they're doing again. So the evolution now has actually set in for those who are there to know that we are here to stay. And come 2023, definitely the ADC will hold its own. His Excellency Dumebi Kachuku, who is not tainted as many of the parties. Do not forget that even amongst the obedient movement, we've had cases where people have taken Peter Obi to the cleaners regarding having two shoes, where some people have said, if you say you're not corrupt, no, you're corrupt, there are things. But Dumebi Kachuku and Ahmed Buhari, who of course are the presidential and vice presidential candidate of the ADC, do not have such baggages as these other people have. And I think that people should begin to look even closely because of the things that that party has stood for. We have the opportunity to have actually, be subsumed by these major parties who said, no, the ADC belongs to the people, and the people that have enabled it to thrive up until this moment should be the one leading the conversation going forward. So I think that the obedient movement could continue. We are creating giant strides, and I can tell you for free that 2023, I say again, mark what I say in your studio, this ADC will take the presidency.
Okay, we'll wait and see.
You should be patient and wait.
We're patiently waiting. But from your analysis, which was very well done anyway, I think you're still reinforcing the point that was made that when the third force emerged, it was supposed to be a break away from what we were seeing, with the APC and the PDP. So this divide that was, in terms of Lone Rangers, like I said earlier, where you're talking about, Peter Obi and his shoes and ADC on the other side, would it not have been something worth considering to have merged, parties like this to come together who had similar objectives, since it was the whole ideology of the third force was supposed to be a breakaway from the APC and PDP. So this whole Lone Ranger syndrome, could it not be a weapon that might be used against these third force parties come 2023 in the end?
In the first place, it is going to be difficult for the ADC to merge with like an Labour Party. Up until the said obedient movement, the Labour Party was nowhere. We have a history of far superiority to the Labour Party. We cannot be swallowed or subsumed by a party that is not superior to us. That's one. Then don't forget what we're trying to spin here. The PDP and the APC have exhausted all ideas to lead. And over the years, it's been back and forth between both parties for many people who have been there, leading up to the nomenclature that particularly the APC evolved from AC, ACN, you have the CNPP, you have the NPP and all that before they actually became the APC. So I do not think that they are an issue here, because we already have gauged the emotional quotient, the acceptability of these parties, and we can't find it. We really can't find it. So when you talk about coming together, I do not really think that is actually a formula that can work in these times for politics, because if you check the level of political sensitization that Nigerians have, it's going to be difficult to tell a lie to them. And people have exhausted that patience that they've given to these parties to want to go ahead with the old order.
But if I may, what we saw during the Osun elections, one of our analysts said that it's not just going to be about popularity, not just going to be about competence, but popularity, which was what gave the PDP the edge there. So how, in terms of popularity, what are these third force parties like yours doing? Because if you're doing so much wonderful work and it doesn't resonate with the electorate, how does it play out?
Well, I don't think that is a very correct statement to say it doesn't resonate with them.
I'm asking about the popularity.
The popularity is everywhere. We've been there. And I have to really refer again to what we've done in 2019. To come forth in an election
with the margin.
No. You are talking about the margin, but you cannot take that away as well.
Because how easy is it going to be to close that margin?
It will be closed for it. It's going to be closed, because if you even look at, let's look at this. In 2019, we had the people that were registered to vote were in excess of 84 million. Of course, at the moment, they're over 109 or thereabouts. At this moment, over 100 million. But cumulatively, we didn't have to up to 50 million people. So even if you're checking those that actually participated in the election and they won, both parties did not garner as much as 30 million out of 84. So that could be another narrative that we have to spin right here if we want to talk about that. So when you talk about the margin, it may not so much be at the margin. Some people win elections with just 10,000 votes, 15,000 votes. So the people that perhaps are making more noise at the moment believe that don't forget, we have not gone to vote. all we see actually are people dancing, people making a whole lot of noise, but we have a strategy started up. From in the country, for instance, the ADC is in approximately 30 states of the Federation. The ADC across this country has about 30 strongholds in this nation. The labor movement perhaps has been on social media and all of that, but when we talk about being on ground, do not forget, you need foot soldiers. We have a stake in places like Kano, like Sokoto, like Katsina, like Kaduna, and of course you go to Gombe, go to Taraba, go to Adamawa, go to Borno. The ADC is actually fully on ground. The ADC across the south, southeast has been holding its own. The ADC in the southwest, of course, I'm here speaking from here on behalf of the party. So the third force may not necessarily have to come together with other smaller parties. We have 18 at the moment that are approved to go into this election. And of all of these parties, the Labour Party may be making the noise, but the ADC has a strategy all set out. So the APC and the PDP are off this race. It's a statement of fact. They could maybe have the deep pockets. They could maybe have been in power. But you need to look at the electorate. That is one side that people don't often look at. We look at these parties. We look at the offices they occupy. But oftentimes we don't speak about the people who, in principle, have rejected them. So the game is there set out for us.
Now, let me just interrupt you. For me, it seems that the third parties are more focused on the presidency. And then it makes me wonder if we're not being a bit unrealistic. Because if you don't have any of your members, maybe in the National Assembly, you don't have any in the House of Reps, you don't have, any in the governors, how do you expect how do you expect to run the country as a lone ranger?
No, we are not a lone ranger. For instance, let the Labour Party show me. My party, the ADC, has produced House of Rep members. And at one point had a senator. My party, the ADC, has done that. So look at the Labour Party. Let the Labour Party show the world one person that has held a political position at the federal level under that banner. And that is the question we should also have. My party has a superior position and a superior stake because we are on the national front, even more than the Labour Party. And if we're talking about leadership in this country, we have a lot more people within the rank and file of those in power that can really do more. So when you talk about maybe that aspect, we really are not just interested there. We are there. We've been there. And don't forget that at the respective states where these lawmakers emerged, if they couldn't hold their own, we have the APC in those states, we have the PDP in those states, we even have the Labour Party, but the ADC in areas where it has produced House of Rep members and a senator at some point actually is a party that could hold its own. So if we could beat the major parties to these positions, I think the ADC has actually done a lot for himself and can also hold his own at the federal level because of this thing. These are the antecedents. These are our strides. And we speak to it because they're important for us to say it. Let any obedient person come here to tell me that they have person here, they have this person here. Let the obedient movement come to tell the world, for instance, that in Kano, in Kaduna, there are people that could actually be true soldiers. I say it very proudly that the ADC has on ground more than could be expected people that have been with us over the past 15, 17 years. And the records can be verified because this is actually global television. So these things I say are very true and could be verified. So when we hear so much noise, we are not worried about that because the things we've done, for instance, in Kano right now, the person that is representing or carrying the flag of the party is everywhere. He has been a neutral man over the years, and at the moment is going to do the best for. Just mark what I tell you here today. And when you talk about the country at the same time, I think that for many people who have followed majority of the parties over the years, one thing that they themselves has realized is you cannot tell lies to the people, especially the millennials who have come to see the lies. Over the years, for me to have actually hold this position that I hold, I have been in the trenches for many years. I have analyzed a lot of the health status of these political parties, and I've come to the conclusion, which is very factual, that it is only the ADC that is healthy enough to go into this contest across the states of the Federation. Do not forget, we never had the circumstances that surrounded most of these parties. Just look at the primaries of these parties. Look at the problem. Look at how these parties could not even stick to their own rules. From the APC, the problem resulting in the emergence of the candidate. Of course, you know the PDP and the problem of the as a matter of fact, the PDP and the APC are the most troubled party right now as far as the Nigerian political space is concerned. When a party cannot hold its own together, when a party cannot coalesce, that means the party itself
itself may not be able to offer anything to the country. So for the APC and the PDP, they are parting problems, and Nigerians can see for themselves. Then you talk about the labor movement. Let the labor movement show me those that they have as foot soldiers across this country. Only the ADC of these four parties is generally accepted as a party that is not tainted. And any other top force that may be, they should be able to speak for themselves. But I'm saying that if we are described as a third force, but you said there's a force there, and if you understand basic physics, for instance, every chemical property has the capacity of its own. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were floored by atomic bomb. It therefore means that when you look at us as underdog, we're fine with that. But we know what we have done, and we know what we will do, and in 2023 we'll definitely hit the bull's eye.
Is your party concerned about vote buying?
Well, that is one thing that we have actually spoken to on a number of occasions. And part of what we did, for instance, His Excellency Dumebi Kachukwu, the presidential candidate of the party, put a word out yesterday on the International Youth Day. And he said everything that will resemble the NSAS protest cannot happen again. Don't forget that when we talk about vote buying, you can't take away youth involvement in vote buying. You can't take away disempowerment of people from vote buying. So my party is a party that really speaks to that issue. And why do people even buy votes? Because people are not economically empowered to actually reject whatever it is you bring to them. It is because people are not sensitized enough to say, no, our value is more than the 5,000, the 10,000, the 20,000 that you want to give to us. Our own value supersedes that. So what the ADC has done in that regard is, from the publication brought out yesterday, it is the identification of these as part of the problems. And that's what His Excellency Dumebi Kachukwu spoke to when he actually released a statement on the International Youth Day. So we do not expect people to actually have their votes bought by us. We will speak to them. We will show them capacity. And in the coming days, for instance, when we have the official unveiling that will take us into more or less the nooks and crannies of this country, what we have planned to do is to actually have crash courses for them in the course of our electioneering campaigns regarding why they must not sell their votes. When for instance, somebody gives you 5,000, I don't think you're going to have even 100 naira every day for that money for an entire 4-year period. So for us as a people, we detest vote buying. We do not want anything to be associated with us that has to do with vote buying. For instance, you're talking about the Ekiti elections that preceded the Oshu elections. It was everywhere. It was everywhere. As a matter of fact, the ADC ad hoc committee is actually collaborating with INEC to also supply information that is against vote buying. That is one of the things we've done. We've written to INEC as a political party that these particular elections coming up, we have a team everywhere in the country, as I told you earlier. And part of what our strategy team has prepared to do is to supply information directly, because one of the things that will make INEC unable to actually prosecute those actually involved in vote buying is lack of actually evidence to prove that they've done this. So I just want to say that we are poised for the 2023 elections, and the ADC will occupy the Aso Rock after the election in February.
Mr. Adeniyi Kunnu, we certainly wish you the best of luck.
Thank you
for the African Democratic Congress. Thank you so much for coming.
But I want to say thank you too for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're watching Newsday. Plenty more still ahead. Please stay with us.